Today we're talking about picking patterns, and we're going to learn a few picking patterns, very useful tool. And let's first sort of figure out the difference between picking patterns and finger picking or fingerstyle guitar. The main difference is that in fingerstyle guitar, you're playing the bass notes or the bass runs that correspond to the chord structure while you're playing the melody on top of them. And that gives you some room to improvise on the melody as well. So you're playing two parts, sort of like the two hands of a piano, playing at once on the guitar. Picking patterns, which can be complicated as well, but they tend to have a pattern in the right hand that continues throughout different chords in the chord progression. Finger picking patterns are generally a little easier to play than fingerstyle guitar because your right hand is essentially doing the same thing over and over. And once you learn to do that, it can make a nice accompaniment for a song. Let's take a look at some picking patterns, and there's 5 examples in the PDF. Here's the first one. These are written over the chords A minor, D minor, E7, back to A minor. When I play the examples, I'm going to play each measure twice. So here's how a picking pattern works. It does change a little bit as you change chords. Often a picking pattern will utilize the root note of a chord as the first bass note, and then some other note perhaps as a counterpoint to that within the pattern. And those notes change by chord. So if you're playing A minor, we're going to play an A note first, and then we're going to use 2 fingers to play this, going back and forth between the second and third strings. Makes a lot of sense to use 2 fingers to do that. And there's our alternate bass note. First the 5th string, then the 4th. So the thumb is actually playing 2 different bass notes while the fingers keep doing the same thing. This is the pattern. Now the pattern shifts slightly when we go to D minor because obviously we have a different bass note. It's now the 4th string, and we'll do 4th and 3rd string bass notes, and the 2 fingers will play the 1st and 2nd. Another shift happens with the E because we're way down here on the 6th string and the 5th string. So those shifts by chord with the bass notes are typical. You notice we also went from the 2nd and 3rd strings. When we went to the higher chord, the D minor, we shifted to the 1st and 2nd strings. Then when we went to the E7 chord, we shifted the 1st and these 2 fingers back to the 2nd and 3rd pair. They could stay on the 1st and 2nd. Doesn't matter that much. You just want your pattern to have some consistency in the rhythm and the fingering of it. We're going to see those same type of shifts through every one of these examples. But the patterns are a little different. Let's look at example number 2. The difference here, different pattern. We're starting with the bass note, and there's only one bass note for measure in this one. Where the other bass note would normally go is here, instead we're going to the high string. Same here. And with the E, same 2 fingers here in the 2-3, but substituting that high note. Now we look at example number 3 of your picking patterns. This one has some has a major difference in it, in that, well, it's similar to what you would call a banjo roll. Some banjo rolls work really well on guitar, and this is similar to a banjo roll. Whoops. This one has a little more urgency than the first two, perhaps a little more drive. I think that's because it's slightly syncopated. It sounds like it's going to be triplets, and the third triplet is cut short because, of course, we don't have room for 3 triplets in 8 beats. So 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and it's cutting off that note. So there's a nice drive to it. Example number 4 is in a different time. This is 6/8 time. So how are we going to play this one? Let's take a look. This one is nicely played if you want to use 3 fingers. You can still do the same 2 fingers. But since we are playing a bass note plus the top 3 strings, you can use the fingers right in order. First, second, third, second, first. First, second, third, second, first fingers. This comes right out of, this would be more of a classical music feel, or using the 3 fingers on the high 3 strings, whereas your thumb is playing the bass strings for the most part. The last example is in 3/4 time, and this one uses 3 fingers as well, except we're going to reverse the order now. We're going to play the 3rd finger, 2nd finger, and 1st finger, descending on the strings 1, 2, and 3. With the bass note on the first beat of that. These picking patterns make a great accompaniment to a lot of songs, and they can be very useful, and it's great for some hand and finger coordination building, and a nice change from straight finger style. So have some fun with them, picking patterns.